The Galactic Council had a problem, and that problem was currently making their third-best strategic navigator eat his own uniform while humming what could only be described as the mathematical expression of despair. "This is unprecedented," Ambassador Krieg announced to the assembly, his 6 arms gesturing in what probably meant something important in his culture, but mostly looked like he was trying to swat invisible flies. "The neural maze has defeated 17 of our finest pilots across 9 species. We are running out of options and, more critically, running out of pilots willing to risk their sanity." The neural maze wasn't actually a maze in any traditional sense. It was an ancient alien navigation system discovered in the Kepler 442 sector, built by a species that had apparently vanished 3 million years ago after collectively deciding that linear time was overrated. The system was supposed to guide ships through the Tartarus field, an asteroid cluster so dense and unpredictable that conventional navigation had a survival rate somewhere between good luck and maybe just stay home. Beyond the field lay the resource-rich Elysium sector, which contained enough rare minerals to make every species in the Council fantastically wealthy. The only catch was that the neural maze was the only safe way through, and it had a nasty habit of turning accomplished pilots into philosophical vegetables. "Define defeated," said Council Member Vrix, a crystalline being who communicated through light refraction and what sounded suspiciously like sarcasm. Krieg's eye stalks drooped. "Commander Threll, our most decorated Voxian pilot, now spends his days drawing perfect circles on the wall of his habitat and referring to himself as a vector." Pilot Essence of Victory completed her attempt and immediately began reciting every shopping list she had ever heard, including items she has never purchased and some that do not exist. Ace Navigator Klitsch got through the entire maze successfully, but emerged convinced he was a potted fern and keeps requesting to be watered. "At least Klitsch completed it," someone muttered. "He refuses to leave the botanical gardens and photosynthesize," Krieg snapped. "That is not a successful outcome." The chamber fell into uncomfortable silence. The neural maze interfaced directly with a pilot's consciousness, requiring them to navigate both physical space and some kind of cognitive dimension that hurt to think about. Every species had sent their best. Every species had gotten them back speaking in tongues or convinced they were geometric shapes. "What about the humans?" Vrix asked, which made several council members groan audibly. "They recently joined our community. Perhaps their neurological structure might offer some advantage." "The humans?" Krieg's voice could have curdled milk across 3 solar systems. "The species that still uses combustion engines for recreation. The ones who look at warning labels and see them as suggestions. The civilization that invented something called energy drinks and considered it progress." "That does sound like they have experience with poor decisions," Vrix noted, "which might be exactly what we need." And that was how Captain Marcus Webb, who had been hauling industrial refrigeration units between Earth and Proxima Station for the past 6 years, found himself standing in front of the Galactic Council being told he was humanity, his volunteer for a suicide mission that might turn him into furniture. "Let me get this straight," Marcus said, scratching his 3-day stubble and looking profoundly unimpressed with the entire situation. "You want me to plug my brain into an ancient alien death machine that has broken every hotshot pilot in the galaxy, navigate through an asteroid field that makes minefields look safe, and do this because everyone else already tried the smart approach and failed?" "That is a crude but essentially accurate summary," Krieg confirmed. "And what do I get out of this?" "The gratitude of the Galactic Council and access to the Elysium sector for human vessels." "Does the gratitude come with hazard pay?" Krieg's arms twitched in what might have been irritation. "Humans. So fixated on material compensation," says the guy trying to get rich off space rocks, Marcus pointed out. "Look, I didn't volunteer for this. Your people showed up at my cargo bay and said the council requested my presence. I thought I was getting a parking ticket, not a suicide mission." "You are humanity's representative," Krieg said stiffly. "I haul refrigerators. If humanity wanted representation, they should have sent someone who owns a tie." Marcus looked around the chamber at the assembled aliens, most of whom were staring at him with expressions that ranged from pity to scientific curiosity. "But sure, what the hell? If your geniuses couldn't figure it out, maybe it's time to try something stupid. When do we start? Dr. Vex Halloran was possibly the most excited person Marcus had ever met, which was concerning given that they were discussing a device that turned people into houseplants. This is absolutely fascinating, Vex said, pulling up holographic brain scans that looked like someone had thrown a rainbow into a blender. The neural maze appears to interface with cognitive patterns at a fundamental level. It reads how you think and then traps you in recursive loops based on your own mental architecture. You're telling me it's a Chinese finger trap for brains, Marcus said. Vex blinked. That is horrifyingly accurate. I'm stealing that for my paper. They were in the observation center overlooking the neural maze chamber, which looked less like a navigation system and more like someone had given an octopus a degree in abstract art and unlimited funding. The interface was a sphere of shifting geometries that hurt to look at directly, surrounded by machinery that seemed to phase in and out of normal space. Let me introduce you to the previous pilots, Krieg said, leading Marcus to a viewing area where 3 beings sat in various states of cognitive aftermath. Commander Threll was a Voxian, which meant he had 4 eyes positioned around his head for tactical awareness and a brain structure optimized for spatial reasoning. Currently, all 4 eyes were focused on the wall where he was drawing his 10,000th perfect circle with a marker. Commander, this is Captain Webb, Krieg said gently. Threll turned his head exactly 90 degrees. Everything is circles, circles within circles. I am circle. You are circle. The universe is a circle that doesn't close properly, and that bothers me more than I can express. Right, Marcus said. That's not ominous at all. Pilot Essence of Victory was next, a crystalline being that looked like someone had taught a geode to fly spacecraft. She was currently humming softly, a sound like wind chimes having an existential crisis. Pilot, can you tell Captain Webb what you experienced? Vex asked. 17 tubes of thermal paste, 46 meters of conduit, 300,000 fasteners grade 7 or higher bulk fertilizer for agricultural districts, cleaning solvent industrial strength, replacement filters for life support systems, 60,000 gallons of potable water, 1 rubber duck for reasons unclear. Essence of Victory continued listing items without pause. She hasn't stopped in 3 weeks, Krieg said quietly. We've tried everything, she just keeps adding to the list. Has anyone actually bought her a rubber duck? Marcus asked. Seems like it might help. She doesn't need a rubber duck, Krieg said irritably. The list says otherwise. The last pilot was Klitsch, a Zenthari who looked vaguely reptilian and was currently sitting in a pot of soil with his arms stretched upward toward the light fixtures. Klitsch actually made it through the maze, Vex explained. Perfect navigation, flawless execution. Then he landed, walked directly to the botanical gardens, climbed into a pot, and has refused to leave ever since. I require water and 6 to 8 hours of indirect sunlight, Klitsch said serenely. Also, my leaves are looking a bit yellow. That might be nutrient deficiency. You don't have leaves, Krieg reminded him. Not with that attitude. Marcus stared at the 3 pilots, each one a testament to what happens when the galaxy's best and brightest plug their brains into ancient alien technology. So what's the common factor here, besides the obvious brain melting? That's what's so puzzling, Vex said, pulling up more data that Marcus couldn't read. Each species approached it differently. The Voxians used tactical analysis. The Zenthari used meditative focus. The crystalline choir, that's Essence's species, used harmonic consciousness. All different methods all resulted in some form of cognitive trap. But Klitsch got through, Marcus pointed out. Yes, which suggests the maze can be navigated successfully, Krieg admitted. But the psychological damage renders the success meaningless. We need someone who can complete it and come back still convinced they're a person and not a photosynthesizing organism. Marcus walked closer to the viewing window, looking down at the neural maze interface. It pulsed with colors that shouldn't exist and geometries that made his eyes water. You know what I'm seeing here? Everyone who failed was really good at their job. Tactical geniuses, meditation masters, whatever harmonic consciousness means. They all went in with a plan. Naturally, Krieg said, one must prepare for such challenges. Right, but here's the thing. That maze broke every single person who prepared. Every pilot who showed up with their A-game got their brains scrambled. Marcus turned away from the window. Maybe the maze is designed to break people who think they can outsmart it. Maybe what you need is someone too dumb to know they should be scared. Are you suggesting your lack of qualifications is an advantage? Krieg's tone could have frozen helium. I'm suggesting that if genius didn't work, maybe it's time to try the opposite. Marcus grinned. Lucky for you, I'm extremely qualified at being unqualified. Vex was practically vibrating with excitement. This is brilliant. A cognitive approach so unsophisticated that the maze's defense mechanisms can't establish a pattern. It's like using a sledgehammer when everyone else brought precision instruments. I'm choosing to take that as a compliment, Marcus said. You really shouldn't, Krieg muttered. 24 hours later, Marcus stood in the preparation chamber while various aliens tried very hard to prepare him for an experience he was actively refusing to prepare for. At minimum, you should review the tactical briefings, Krieg insisted, holding up a data pad that probably contained several thousand pages of information Marcus had no intention of reading. Pass. Then at least undergo the cognitive enhancement protocols. They'll strengthen your mental defenses against hard pass. Captain Webb, you cannot simply walk into the neural maze without any preparation whatsoever. Krieg's arms were gesturing so frantically he looked like he was trying to generate lift. Every pilot underwent months of training. And every pilot is now either drawing shapes, listing groceries, or photosynthesizing, Marcus pointed out. He was wearing the interface suit, which looked like someone had combined a wetsuit with a Christmas tree and called it safety equipment. Look, I get that you want me to do this your way, but your way has a 100% failure rate, so I'm going to do it my way. Which is what exactly? Vex asked, taking notes because apparently turning humans into cautionary tales was publishable research. Marcus held up his personal audio player, a device so outdated that several council members had actually gasped when they saw it. Music. Music, Krieg repeated flatly. Yep, specifically the worst pop songs humanity produced in the early 21st century. Stuff that makes you question why we ever invented recording technology. Marcus scrolled through his playlist. I've got boy bands, girl bands, bands that weren't sure what they were, auto-tune that should be considered a war crime, lyrics about summer romance written by people who clearly never experienced summer or romance. This is your strategy, Krieg said. Terrible music. Terrible music and not caring, Marcus confirmed. Every pilot who went in there was focused, right? Concentrated, trying really hard to solve the puzzle. But the maze feeds on that. It locks onto how you think and turns it against you, so I'm not going to think, I'm just going to hum along to objectively awful music and see what happens. This is insane. Probably, but we've already established that sane didn't work. Marcus fitted the neural interface crown onto his head. It felt like wearing a headache. So let's try insane and see if it's any worse. Vex checked the monitoring equipment. All systems are ready. Captain Webb, I should warn you that the initial interface can be disorienting. You'll experience sensory input that doesn't correspond to any normal. Yeah, don't panic when reality melts, got it. Marcus hit play on his music and immediately regretted several life choices as synthetic drums and auto-tuned vocals assaulted his eardrums. Perfect. Let's get this over with. I've got a delivery schedule to keep. The neural maze interface activated, and the world went sideways in 12 dimensions at once. Marcus had expected weird. He'd been briefed on weird. But experiencing weird turned out to be significantly weirder than anticipated. The chamber disappeared, replaced by a space that was simultaneously infinite and claustrophobic, filled with colors he didn't have names for and shapes that changed every time he tried to focus on them. Then came the sensation of something vast and ancient brushing against his mind, like a cosmic hand reaching into his skull to see what made him tick. This was the moment that had broken everyone else, when the maze analyzed their cognitive patterns and built traps specifically designed for their psychology. Marcus felt it start to map his thought processes, searching for patterns, looking for the structured logic it could twist into recursive loops. And in that moment, when it expected to find tactical analysis or meditative calm or whatever harmonic consciousness was supposed to feel like, Instead, it encountered summer love, summer nights. Everything feels so right when you're holding me tight, under the stars so bright. The maze, if it could be said to have emotions, seemed confused. Marcus started humming, off-key, deliberately. The neural maze had been built by beings who transcended normal space-time and probably thought in mathematical poetry. It was designed to challenge the most sophisticated minds in the galaxy. It was not designed for a human cargo hauler who was currently wondering if he'd remembered to cancel his subscription to that streaming service he never used, while simultaneously butchering the chorus of a song that was objectively terrible, even when performed correctly. Navigation data began flowing into Marcus's consciousness. Complex vectors through the Tartarus field that would have required years of training to understand. He ignored them completely and wondered if his cat was still mad about the vet visit last month. The maze tried harder to establish a pattern. Marcus thought about his mom's meatloaf recipe, which was somehow both dry and soggy. Somewhere in the observation center, Vex was probably having a scientific crisis, but Marcus was too busy being aggressively mediocre at humming to care. The neural maze, Marcus decided, was what would happen if someone gave a migraine artistic ambitions and unlimited funding. He was navigating, technically. Information flowed through his consciousness like water through a sieve, providing vectors and trajectories through the Tartarus field. The maze showed him asteroid trajectories, gravitational anomalies, and shortcuts through space-time that made his brain itch. Whenever he tried to focus on any of it, the information would split into fractal patterns that threatened to trap his attention. This was what had broken Commander Threll. The Voxian had tried to analyze the data tactically, to build a comprehensive strategy. The maze had taken his analytical mind and locked it into an infinite loop of tactical assessment, each layer revealing more complexity until Threll's consciousness had collapsed into perfect circles of never-ending analysis. Marcus avoided this by thinking about literally anything else. Ba-da-da-dum, something heartbeat, la-la-la, complete. He hummed, getting at least 60% of the notes wrong while his hands moved through motions he didn't consciously control, inputting navigation commands. The maze tried a different approach. Reality folded in on itself, presenting Marcus with an emotional feedback loop. It was the same trap that had caught Essence of Victory, designed to latch onto feelings and amplify them into overwhelming recursive experiences. Joy feeding on joy until it became paralyzing ecstasy, or fear multiplying into existential terror. Marcus felt the loop trying to establish itself, searching for an emotion to amplify. It found mild annoyance about a parking ticket he'd gotten 3 years ago that he still thought was unfair. The maze attempted to amplify this into recursive rage. Marcus's brain, helpful as always, shifted to wondering whether the plural of octopus was octopi, octopuses, or octopodes, and if anyone who corrected you about it was automatically insufferable. The emotional trap collapsed, unable to find purchase. In the Zenthari approach, Klitsch had used meditative focus to navigate the maze. It had worked beautifully right up until the maze had taken his serene mental state and convinced him that achieving oneness with the universe meant becoming a plant. Perfect focus had become perfect identification with photosynthetic life. Marcus didn't have perfect focus. Marcus had whatever the opposite of focus was. His attention span was like a caffeinated squirrel in a room full of shiny objects, and the neural maze was discovering this in real time. Navigation data continued flowing. Marcus continued ignoring it while his hands executed maneuvers through the Tartarus field that should have been impossible. Asteroids the size of mountains whipped past his consciousness. He wondered if he'd left his oven on before leaving Earth. Had he used the oven that day? Maybe. Probably not. But maybe. The maze presented him with a geometric puzzle that existed in 6 dimensions and required solving through pure mathematical intuition. Marcus's brain looked at the 6-dimensional geometry and immediately started thinking about how his ship's registration was up for renewal, and that was going to be annoying because the DMV was the same everywhere in the galaxy apparently. The puzzle solved itself while he wasn't looking, because he'd accidentally input the solution while thinking about bureaucracy. Under the moon we found our tune, dancing till noon, ending too soon. Marcus's humming had degraded from off-key to whatever came after off-key. Off-chord? Beyond chord? The music was objectively terrible and he was making it worse, and somehow this was working. The maze threw everything at him. Paradoxes that should have frozen his consciousness. Logic traps that had no solution. Cognitive puzzles designed to snare even the most sophisticated minds, each one carefully crafted to be impossible, demanding absolute focus and perfect reasoning to navigate. Marcus accidentally solved them all while composing a mental grocery list. Milk, eggs. That weird bread his neighbor liked. Did they still make that bread? Probably. Maybe he should check. Behind him, in a metaphorical sense because space was weird here, Marcus could feel the ghosts of previous pilots' attempts, Threll's tactical genius fragmenting into infinite analysis, essence of Victory's harmonic consciousness splintering into endless lists, Klitsch's meditative focus achieving perfect peace as a fern. They'd all tried to be better than the maze. Smarter, more focused, more capable. They'd brought their A-game to a challenge that ate A-games for breakfast. Marcus was bringing whatever came after Z-game. He was bringing the game you played when you'd given up on games entirely and were just seeing what happened. And apparently what happened was success through aggressive indifference and truly terrible humming. The asteroid field scrolled through his consciousness, each rock precisely mapped and avoided. His hands moved in patterns he didn't understand, guided by information he wasn't paying attention to. The maze tried desperately to find something in his thought process to latch onto, some pattern it could exploit. It found him wondering if his cat could tell when he was thinking about other cats, and whether that was betrayal in feline terms. The maze, built by beings who had transcended linear existence, had no idea what to do with this. Marcus hummed another terrible chorus, missed another dozen notes, and accidentally executed a navigation maneuver so perfect that it would be studied for generations. He didn't notice. He was too busy remembering that embarrassing thing he'd said at a party 7 years ago, and wondering if anyone else still thought about it or if that was just him. The end of the maze approached, though Marcus didn't know it. He was too busy wondering if anyone actually liked the taste of energy drinks, or if people just pretended because they were supposed to. Marcus emerged from the neural maze with two thoughts. First, that song was really stuck in his head now, and that was annoying, and second, why was everyone staring at him? Captain Webb. Krieg's voice was very quiet, which seemed wrong because the ambassador generally spoke at volumes designed to assert dominance across solar systems. Did you just complete the neural maze? I guess? Marcus pulled off the interface crown, which left his hair standing up in directions that violated several grooming standards. I did the thing. Flew through the asteroid field. It was weird. Am I done? Can I go home now? The observation center had gone completely silent. Every alien in the room was staring at monitoring equipment like it had just personally insulted their ancestors. Vex spoke up, voice shaking slightly. You completed it in 47 minutes. Is that good? The previous fastest time was 6 hours, by Klitsch, who became a plant. Right, the fern guy. Marcus stretched, feeling like he'd just woken from a nap that happened in 12 dimensions. So I win? Do I get a prize? Because I was serious about the hazard pay thing. Krieg's arms were frozen in mid-gesture, which probably meant something significant in Voxian culture but mostly made him look like a statue having a crisis. You cannot have just completed the neural maze by humming terrible music and not paying attention. And yet, Marcus gestured at the monitoring equipment which was displaying his perfect navigation through the Tartarus field in real time. 0 errors, optimal path, record time. I seem to have done exactly that. This is impossible, one of the council scientists said, a being that looked like someone had given a mushroom a doctorate. The neural maze is specifically designed to challenge focused cognitive patterns. Your brain activity shows you weren't focused on anything. Yeah, that was kind of the plan. Vex was reviewing the neural scan data with the expression of someone whose entire dissertation had just been disproven by a guy who hauled refrigerators. Captain Webb, your thought patterns during the navigation were chaotic, there's no other word for it. You were simultaneously processing the navigation data while thinking about cats, recipes, grocery lists, minor social embarrassments, and the lyrics to what might be the worst song ever recorded. Summer Heartbeat by the Crystal Dreams, Marcus confirmed. And yes, it's objectively terrible. That's why it's perfect. You can't overthink when you're forcing your brain to process that level of auditory trauma. So your method, Krieg said slowly like he was explaining quantum mechanics to a rock, was to deliberately divide your attention across multiple meaningless topics while the maze fed you navigation data? Not exactly. I didn't divide my attention. I just never gave the maze anything to grab onto. Every time it tried to establish a pattern, I was already thinking about something else. It was looking for structure, for logic, for focused thought. Instead, it got whatever random garbage my brain throws out when I'm not trying to be impressive. Another council member, this one resembling a very disappointed cloud, spoke up. Are you telling us that the secret to navigating the neural maze, a device that has defied our greatest minds, is to be scatterbrained? I mean, when you say it like that, it sounds dumb. It is dumb, Krieg said. That's the point. It's profoundly, catastrophically dumb. But it worked, Vex pointed out, still scrolling through data. The maze couldn't establish a cognitive trap because there was no consistent pattern to trap. Every mechanism it used, every defense designed to snare sophisticated thought, failed because Captain Webb's thought process was too unsophisticated to snare. I'm right here, Marcus said. I can hear you calling me stupid. We're not calling you stupid, Vex said. We're calling you chaotically inefficient in a way that proved unexpectedly optimal. That's definitely calling me stupid with extra words. Krieg was pacing now, all 6 arms gesturing in what Marcus had learned meant the ambassador was having some kind of existential crisis. This changes everything. Every species in the council has been approaching the maze with their best pilots, their most trained minds, their greatest cognitive achievements, and the solution was to send someone who was actively not trying. Someone who doesn't overthink, Vex corrected. The maze was designed by beings who thought in dimensions we can barely comprehend. They built defenses against every form of sophisticated cognition because that's all they knew. They never considered that someone might succeed by essentially not engaging with the challenge on its own terms. Like a Chinese finger trap, Marcus said. Exactly like a Chinese finger trap. Vex was getting excited again. The harder you try, the more stuck you get. But if you relax, if you don't fight it, you slip right through. A crystalline choir representative, who had been silent until now, chimed in with a harmonic question that the translator rendered as, "Are you suggesting that humanity's defining cognitive characteristic is not overthinking?" Among other things, Marcus said. Look, we're a species that invented deep-fried butter and thought that was worth celebrating. We're not exactly known for our long-term planning or sophisticated reasoning. But sometimes, not overthinking is exactly what you need. This is humiliating, Krieg muttered. Absolutely humiliating. We sent our finest tactical minds, our most disciplined navigators, our most harmoniously conscious pilots, and they were all defeated by a maze that a human cargo hauler beat by humming off key and thinking about cats. Don't forget the grocery list, Marcus added helpfully. That was crucial. I am going to need so much therapy, Krieg said to no one in particular. 3 weeks later, the Galactic Council formally granted humanity access to the Elysium sector, which meant Marcus's act of aggressive mediocrity had accidentally secured his species a fortune in rare minerals. He was trying very hard not to think about it. You're a hero, Vex said, walking with Marcus through the council station toward the docking bay where his ship waited. 3 papers published, 2 more under review, and I'm being invited to speak at every xenopsychology conference in the galaxy. About how humans are too dumb to be trapped by smart things. About how human cognitive architecture represents a fascinating example of adaptive chaos in action. Vex paused. But yes, essentially that. Krieg was waiting at the docking bay, looking like he'd aged several years in 3 weeks. Captain Webb, I wanted to wish you well before your departure. You mean you wanted to make sure I'm actually leaving? That too. Krieg's arms drooped. You've created quite a situation here. Do you know what's been happening since word got out about your success? Marcus had a sinking feeling. Do I want to know? Every species on the council is now attempting to train pilots in the art of not thinking. Krieg pulled up his datapad, showing Marcus footage that was equal parts fascinating and horrifying. The Voxians have established meditation retreats designed to teach tactical officers how to not have tactical thoughts. The Zenthari are running advanced courses in strategic distraction. The Crystalline Choir is attempting to achieve disharmonious consciousness, which is causing problems I don't have words for. On the screen, a Voxian pilot was sitting in a meditation chamber with an instructor. Clear your mind of all tactical considerations, the instructor said. Think about nothing. But if I'm thinking about nothing, then I'm thinking about nothing, which is still thinking, the pilot responded. This creates a paradox where, no, stop analyzing the paradox, just don't think. But analyzing is how we process information. If I stop analyzing, how do I... You're overthinking, not overthinking. Marcus watched several more examples of aliens trying desperately to be random and failing spectacularly. This is a disaster. This is what you've wrought, Krieg said, but without much heat. Though I suppose we brought it on ourselves. We were so certain that sophistication was the answer that we never considered the alternative. You're still overthinking it, Marcus said. The point wasn't to not think. The point was that I didn't try to beat the maze on its terms. I just did my thing and let the maze worry about it. How very human, Krieg said dryly. Ignore the rules. Stumble through chaos, somehow succeed and act like it was the plan all along. Now you're getting it. Marcus hefted his bag. Look, I appreciate the galactic significance and all, but I really do have deliveries to make. Some of those refrigeration units are on a schedule. Of course. Krieg extended one arm for what Marcus had learned was a gesture of respect. I must admit, Captain Webb, I underestimated humanity. I assumed your species' lack of sophistication was a weakness. It usually is, Marcus said, shaking the offered appendage. But every once in a while, it's exactly what you need. Vex pulled Marcus into a hug that was deeply uncomfortable for both of them. Thank you for letting me study your brain. I'm calling the phenomenon web cognition, and it's going to make me very famous. Just don't clone me or anything weird. The ethics board rejected that proposal immediately, Vex said cheerfully. Though I did ask. Marcus boarded his ship, a cargo hauler called the Reasonable Doubt, that had never been involved in anything remotely reasonable. The cockpit smelled like recycled air and old coffee, which was exactly how it should smell. He strapped in, ran through pre-flight and pulled up his nav computer. His playlist was still queued up, summer heartbeat ready to assault his eardrums again. He should probably delete it. Find something less terrible to listen to during long hauls. He left it right where it was. As Marcus pulled away from the station, his comm crackled. Captain Webb, this is Council Station Control. We're getting reports that several species are requesting you return to train their pilots in your technique. Tell them I'm busy. They're offering substantial compensation. Tell them I'm very busy. Marcus adjusted his heading for the Proxima Station run. The technique can't really be taught anyway. You either overthink everything or you're human. And if you have to try to be human, you're already missing the point. Understood, Captain. Safe travels. Marcus cut the comm and engaged the autopilot for the first jump. Through the viewport, he could see the Tartarus field in the distance, the asteroid cluster that had terrified galactic navigation for centuries until someone who hauled refrigerators hummed his way through it. His datapad blinked with a message from Earth. Apparently, the media had gotten hold of the story. They were calling him things like humanity's champion and the maze breaker. Someone wanted to option his life story for a movie. Marcus deleted all of it and pulled up his delivery schedule. 17 stops, 4 systems, 3 weeks of travel time. Perfect. Behind him, the galaxy was having a collective crisis about whether sophistication was overrated. Alien species that had spent millennia perfecting their cognitive abilities were now desperately trying to be less perfect. Philosophers were arguing about the nature of intelligence. Scientists were questioning everything they thought they knew about consciousness. Marcus didn't care. He'd done what they'd asked, made it through their impossible maze, and now he had refrigerators to deliver. If humanity's great contribution to galactic civilization was proving that sometimes you could succeed by not caring, well, that sounded about right. He queued up his playlist, let the terrible music wash over him, and started humming along off-key as the reasonable doubt jumped to FTL. Somewhere in the council chambers, Krieg was probably having another crisis about human unpredictability. Somewhere in a lab, Vex was probably publishing another paper about cognitive chaos. Somewhere in the Zenthari gardens, Klitsch was probably still convinced he was a fern. And Marcus was hauling cargo, humming terrible music and wondering if he'd remembered to pay his taxes this quarter. Probably not. He'd deal with it later. The neural maze had broken every pilot in the galaxy, but it hadn't counted on humanity's secret weapon, weapons grade